This afternoon I'm at the site of the old Anthracite Coal Breaker here in Shickshinny, PA. I'm up on the mountainside not far from Paddy Run Creek, and this is the uppermost portion of the coal breaker. The column bank is straight up the hill behind me, and you can see there are some stone wall foundations remaining, and there's a huge metal gear and shaft and sprocket that looks as though it was hooked to a conveyor chain at one time. Anthracite coal was mined here in Shickshinny going way back into the 1830s. By different companies, the Paxton Coal Company, the Salem Coal Company, Shickshinny Coal Company, a Stackhouse Coal Company, and I believe the West End Coal Company, whose main operation was across the river over in Mackinac. This coal breaker was built right up the side of this mountain, which is quite steep, from this point down to what is now Route 11, and of course back in the day it was the road and the railroad tracks. And here's a view going down the mountainside. It's a little difficult to see with all the trees here now, but there are more portions of foundation on the way down the mountain, and I'll be going down there in a bit to show you what's remaining of them. If it's possible for objects to be lucky, then those two old glass window panes laying right over there have to be a couple of the luckiest. This old building has literally rotted to the ground. Massive 12 by 12 timbers have fallen down and decomposed into mulch. That window frame was located someplace up on that building and had literally fallen off and ended up against that wall. And yet the windows are laying there right on the stone wall in perfect condition. This is a view of a top portion of a foundation wall at the lower end of this site. And underneath all that rotten wood and debris is a huge metal hub and shaft and gear. And this whole area is just littered with the remains of whatever was on top of this building. When the wood rotted away, everything just fell inside. There's another metal gear, angle irons, steam pipe. Basically everything that was left behind is still laying here. This is a view of an outside wall at the lower portion of this site. And the interesting thing about this site is, unlike most of the colliery buildings in the Wyoming Valley, especially the wooden frame ones, that completely burnt to the ground or were dismantled and scrapped for salvage and all traces were removed, when this site was abandoned, what was of obvious value was taken, and what was not worth hauling off this mountain was left behind, and it's still here. There's more sections of pipe and angle iron. There's a steam valve still left in the open position. You can see the ground is just covered with whatever was inside of this building. This is a small concrete structure at the lowermost section of this site, almost at Route 11. And inside of it is still an old metal pulley, be it broken, and a section of bucket type conveyor with chains still on it. This is an old wooden chute here at the site of this old breaker, and it goes from the bottom of the hill all the way up to the column bank, and it's still lined in portions with pieces of sheet iron. I'm up here on a trail above the old Shickshinny Coal Breaker, and I know it's a little difficult to see with all the leaves and trees, but this is a view looking straight down a plain, which is sort of an incline road, and it was built back in the early days of mining this area through solid rock and anything else that was in the way, and was used to transport the coal from the top of this mountain down the side to the breaker, which is directly below. And it's obvious that it was a tremendous amount of work to mine coal up here and get it down to the breaker and to market. This is a view from the lower portion of the plain that led down to the breaker up towards the trail. And this is the rock cut. These rocks are about 10 feet high, and this plain's about 12 feet wide. You can see how much work went into blasting through these rocks to make this plain. Up along the trail above the Shickshinny Breaker, you never know what you're going to find. Here's an old pair of narrow gauge railroad tracks that cross the trail. They lead into this small abandoned mine opening. This mine's only about 50 feet in length, and it never really gets any wider than you see at the opening here, probably about 6 feet. The roof is solid rock, and near the end the floor comes up and is also solid rock. This is an inside view of the small abandoned mine here on Shickshinny Mountain, and you can see the old railroad ties and railroad tracks that were let into the mine. It ends right there, about 50 feet in. It's about 6 feet wide at best. On the left side is very bony coal. It may look a little bit better because it's wet, but it is bony. On the right hand side is mostly shale. Either there was a seam of good coal in between this bony coal and this shale, or they had hoped that if they kept digging they would hit good coal. Either way they didn't, and the mine was abandoned. The roof is solid rock. The floor comes up in the back last few feet and is also solid rock. And that's an inside view of this abandoned mine. Here's some still photos that I took while I was at the site of the old Shickshinny Breaker. These first photos were taken on the upper portion near the calm bank, and actually the first photo was of Paddy Run Creek. These are foundation walls, and that piece of machinery was hanging on by a hair. The only thing that kept it from falling into that foundation was the fact that it was hung up on one side on those rotten timbers. There's a section of rail that got somehow left behind. It's a bucket type conveyor. That section of narrow gauge mine rail was sticking up out of the ground, just waiting for somebody to trip on it. There's part of an old electrical transformer tower that was dated July 1909. These next few photos were taken from the very top of the mountain, facing in different directions. There's a section of rail that's sticking out of a pile of backfill. And those are the tracks leading into the small mine opening. That's the view looking up the column bank, and there's the chute that extends from the column bank down to Route 11. That's the wall at Route 11. And this last view of the column bank, taken from a distance, was taken from across the river at the Mackinac Loop Trail parking lot.